Welcome to Cardinals Cover 2 with Grialou and Mike Jurecki. Cardinals Cover 2 is brought to you by Arizona Cardinals Podcasts. Visit azcardinals.com/podcasts. From the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, here's Grialou and Mike Jurecki.
So no one knows how this will work, but call me intrigued. Kliff Kingsbury is head coach. If nothing else, MJ, the Cardinals just became a whole lot interested in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, and I think that was the anticipation. Once you zero in on who you want to hire as the head coach, and the Cardinals obviously ID'd that going into the process, and that's Kliff Kingsbury. Now you want to work on, the defense. Obviously, you still got to work on the offensive coordinator, O-line, other positions, but bringing in a former head coach, a former defensive coordinator, and Vance Joseph, to me, that's a home run. And, we'll see how he fills out his staff. But, Billy Davis was announced today. He's been a coordinator in 3 different markets, Arizona, San Francisco, and Philadelphia. He's going to coach the linebackers. So I'm intrigued. Definitely, this is what you want to do, and curious to see what they do on offense. We know that Kliff's going to be the play caller, but you got to have maybe a running game coordinator, a passing game coordinator. And so it'll be interesting to see some of the guys we're hearing that they possibly could bring in and retain.
Yeah, busy last 24 hours for the Cardinals here as we take off on this Football Friday here on Cards Cover 2. Let you know what's ahead on the show and putting a coaching staff in place. We've got some names in place and other names reported, predicting how the offense might look under Kingsbury. Some of the numbers are eye-opening. And we'll preview the playoff matchups this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Of course, your questions via social media as well, using the hashtag CardsCover2, hashtag CardsCover2 with the number 2 to get involved in the show here this afternoon. But first, the news of the day. Kingsbury had called it priority number 1, hiring a coaching staff. And there have been 3 official hires so far. We already talked about a couple of them. Vance Joseph, the former Broncos head coach, named defensive coordinator. He reportedly interviewed for the same position with the Browns. Billy Davis, named linebackers coach. And Jeff Rodgers retained as special teams coordinator. Let's start with Joseph. And before you and I, MJ, have a chance to talk about it, let's hear from Kingsbury talking exclusively to azcardinals.com on the Joseph hire.
Yeah, I've known Vance a little while. It was great to sit down with him the last couple of days, see where his head was at, kind of tell my vision. And, his veteran presence, he was just a head coach, so I can lean on him for certain aspects and pick his brain on ideas. And then a great leader, obviously a great defensive mind, and I really think our players are going to respond well to him on that side of the football.
Remember what General Manager Steve Keim had said at the press conference on Wednesday when asked specifically about the defense and a defensive coordinator. He wanted someone with experience. Well, Joseph has experience as a defensive coordinator and also as a head coach, and now you checked a couple of boxes. He's been the Broncos head coach the past 2 seasons. Record-wise, not great, but his defenses were very, very strong. The Cardinals certainly know all about that, and he does have the experience as a 3-4. The Broncos played that, and also 4-3, which is what the Dolphins did when he was the D coordinator in 2016. So that ability to adjust depending on personnel certainly looks like a home run hire, at least from right now.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, going out and finding that guy, and there's a lot of former head coaches that are trying to get back in the NFL, and sometimes, you take a step back and you become a coordinator, but the fact is, I mean, I think it's safe to say, based on the hire and some of the experience they're bringing in on the defensive side of the football, and I don't want to speak for anybody, but you got to think that Vance Joseph is going to be the head coach of the defense. Now, you want one voice, and that obviously is Kliff Kingsbury, the head coach, but he's going to rely on these guys' experience with Billy Davis, so this is what they wanted. I know there are other names out there. Obviously, Todd Bowles is probably at the top of the list, but it was going to be tough to get him out of Tampa with Bruce Arians. And so, to me, Vance Joseph was the next best guy. I'm intrigued by Chuck Pagano. I wasn't really intrigued with Jack Del Rio or Dom Capers, and Pagano could end up with the Bears. So, interesting. But I think the Cardinals definitely improved from a coaching standpoint this afternoon.
Curious when we get a chance to talk with Kingsbury on if indeed we hear that, okay, I'm in charge of the offense, Joseph is in charge of the defense, kind of like what we heard coming out of Los Angeles with the Rams, and it was Sean McVay offense, Wade Phillips defense. If it's going to be, I wouldn't say a total separation, and Kingsbury's going to have to look at everything. I understand that, but more, okay, that's your side of the ball. I'll lean on you a lot more. And if there's questions, then yeah, I need to be part of that process. But offense is my lane, defense is your lane.
Yeah, and you can make the same case that Matt Nagy did the same thing with Vic Fangio. I mean, he basically, inherited him, and now he's no longer there. He's in Denver. So, yeah, I mean, this is what the Cardinals wanted to do, and there's a lot of quality candidates out there. And, to me, I think this is a home run, as I mentioned, and I'm curious to see, how this defense is going to play, because we know they had a tough time stopping the run. They weren't the best in open field tackling, and I'm intrigued with Budda Baker, and you throw in DJ Swearinger in the secondary, and then they need to find another corner. But I think they got something to work with here based on the coaching staff.
2 years ago, the Broncos defense ranked number 5 against the rush, and just this. Looking at the background of Joseph, a longtime defensive backs coach, stops with the Bengals, Texans, 49ers. He's worked with Marvin Lewis, Gary Kubiak, Mike Nolan. He's also worked with Billy Davis when they were together in San Francisco. So a lot of connections and certainly a lot of experience when you talk about Vance Joseph, the new Cardinals defensive coordinator. For more on the hire, our colleagues Lisa Matthews and Kyle Odegaard with something we like to call Quick Slant.
Head coach for the Arizona Cardinals, check. Now D coordinator. Arizona Cardinals announced that Vance Joseph will be the next defensive coordinator, and as desired, he comes with a lot of experience. Obviously, things didn't work out for him in Denver, but what can he bring to this Arizona Cardinals defense?
And I think Denver didn't have a lot of success because of the issues at quarterback, which when you're defensive coordinator now, that's not your responsibility, not your worry. 2 years ago, Denver defense was number 10 overall in DVOA, the defensive efficiency. Last year, they were number 5, so a good track record the last couple of years. He plays that 3-4 that you want. He's got coaching experience. All in all, I think Cardinals fans will be excited about the hire.
And obviously the goal is to get this Cardinals defense back on track, back in the top 10 overall. And Kyle, they're switching back to the 3-4. How will this help just the personnel that this Arizona Cardinals team already has and that they'll bring in this offseason?
Yeah, and we've seen what they can do in the 3-4 before 2018. It's interesting to me that Steve Keim came out in the press conference and said, yeah, we're switching back. It wasn't a mystery. It's more of an attacking defense, it seems like, and when you've got guys like Hassan Reddick, and if you're able to get Dale Buchanan back, he's an impending free agent, but if he comes back, those guys' skill sets seem more better for the 3-4, so we'll see how it goes, but we've seen the track record of success previously, and I think that's why you want to switch it back.
All right, next up, we'll see who the Cardinals bring in at OC.
Appreciate that, guys. The Davis edition here as we continue on Cards Cover 2. Another candidate or now coach with vast experience, and his first stop in the NFL was with the Pittsburgh Steelers way back in 1992. And, of course, he's got ties and familiarity around the Arizona Cardinals. 4 seasons he spent with the Cardinals from 2007 to 2010, the linebackers coach for the first 2 seasons, and then the defensive coordinator in 2009 and 2010. Part of that Super Bowl run, part of those playoff appearances as far as winning the NFC West. And you talk about experience now on that side of the ball with the 2 hires that we know, Joseph and Davis. You can't get much more experience.
No, and the fact that you have a former head coach, you had a guy that actually called the defense, and you look at Billy Davis, as you mentioned, he's been a coordinator in 3 different markets, and now he's coming back to the Cardinals, and they were successful with him, and he's one of the best guys you'll meet. I mean, there's not a mean bone in his body. He's very open. He's engaging. He's approachable. So looking forward to seeing him again because, to me, this needs to be discussed, just the experience they're bringing to that side of the ball. Again, Al Holcomb, he was a first-time coordinator. I think it showed. I was thinking Wilkes would start to calling plays in the second half of the season. Don't know that for sure, but that didn't happen. You start looking at the linebackers coaches and then the secondary coaches. I think you're starting to see more experience coming in. Nothing against this guy. I'm a big Larry Foote fan, but at this point in time, Kliff Kingsbury's got to do what he's got to do on his staff. But bringing in experienced guys that have done it, and you're not hoping they can do it. Big difference in the previous regime.
Cardinals, 49ers, and Eagles. That is where Davis has called the defense. He spent the last 2 seasons, however, on the college scene at Ohio State, coaching linebackers. And
I know where you're going here.
The elephant in the room, potential number 1 draft pick, wore Ohio State colors. Of course, of a different position, Nick Bosa.
Nick Bosa, he's going to be the first pick in the draft. Obviously the Cardinals, I believe, this is me thinking out loud, that they're open for business. But, hey, you take the best available player. If you can't get a trade partner, and it's easy to say trade down, but you got to find a partner. They got to be willing to offer you some compensation. But he was a linebackers coach, but he was on that side of the ball. Bosa plays defensive line, though.
Yes,
but you can get great intel.
Exactly, and that's the thing. There will be a lot of information between now and the NFL draft, Senior Bowl, Combine, interviews. So the more information you can get, the better. And, of course, now the Cardinals have someone within the building that can tell them a little about Nick Bosa. Someone who is very familiar with Davis and Joseph, for that matter, Bertrand Berry. Earlier today, we had a chance to catch up with our co-host on the Red Sea Report for his thoughts on these two defensive moves. First things first, tell me about Vance Joseph, your thoughts on him as the new defensive coordinator.
Well, he has experience as a defensive coordinator, and more importantly, he has experience, albeit brief, as a head coach, just being released from the Denver Broncos after 2 seasons there. I think being on the defensive side, he was a defensive coordinator. That's where he cut his teeth on that side of the ball as a defensive back coach with the Miami Dolphins, and then being the coordinator back in 2016. I think he has shown a capacity to really get the most out of his defense, and running that 3-4 scheme, I thought that was important. So he checks a lot of boxes for the Arizona Cardinals, having that head coaching experience, having success in the NFL already as a defensive coordinator. And I know that he will come in and he will do a really good job of restoring this defense to where it once was before.
The biggest box, though, as you mentioned, running that 3-4 defense with the Denver Broncos, though he does have experience with the 4-3. He did that in Miami, but we know this team runs much better when it's a 3-4, but the ability to maybe mix and match a little bit, to adjust. Then that's the word that kept coming up in 2018, the Cardinals defense unable to adjust. But Joseph, at least through his past history on the sidelines, appears to fit that mold.
He does fit the mold, and the biggest challenge for him coming into this situation with the Cardinals is run defense. We saw this team struggle from preseason all the way through Week 17 against the run, and he understands that in order for this defense to get back to where it wants to be, they're going to have to be able to do the fundamental things. And the fundamental thing is, first and foremost, stopping the run. And once they're able to shore that up, I think everything else will flow from there.
Broncos in 2017, MJ, number 5 against the run.
Yeah, it's encouraging. B-Train, do you like the way the NFL is going? Because we know about Sean McVay, and he basically came out and said, Wade Phillips, you're the head coach of the defense. And I think if you're Matt Nagy, while he was there, Vic Fangio, he did the same thing. And I don't think a guy like Kliff Kingsbury is afraid to say that, bringing in a former head coach and really he's going to run the defense. We have a head coach on defense. How do you see this in the future when it comes to the NFL?
Well, I think it works in these situations with a Sean McVay and then again with Kliff Kingsbury because they didn't have the experience already.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are relying on guys who do have experience. And I think the more experienced coaches in this league are not going to necessarily need that experienced guy as a coordinator. They're going to need a guy that's good and knows what he's doing first and foremost. But the fact that you have a new head coach who hadn't been in that situation, he's going to need all the help that he can get and lean on those assistants, as far as those coordinators, as much as he possibly can.
B-Train, if you look at the front 7, and now they're going to go to the 3-4, and it's just hypothetical. If they draft Bosa, maybe they trade down, but he would line up on the outside. You'd have Peters over the nose tackle, and whether Pierre, who struggled in the 4-3, he's more of a 3-4 guy, or Kemdichi. And then you look at the linebackers. If they retain Buchanan and Reddick's going to go back inside, then you got Golden and Jones. How do you like that front 7?
I like the front 7. I think they've been a very productive group. I think when healthy, they are as formidable as any defensive front that we see. And I think for Chandler Jones, most importantly, I saw him tweet out earlier the fact that they are going back to a 3-4. He was as happy as can be. And when you have guys that are comfortable and happy in their positions,
mm-hmm.
they tend to play a little bit freer. They tend to play a little bit looser, and you tend to get the most production out of them. And that's really the goal. And so not that it's the only thing to make those guys completely happy. You do want them feeling comfortable in the role that you're asking them to perform.
All right, one more on Vance Joseph. You hear people in Miami say this guy's a straight shooter, well respected. What are your memories of playing for Vance Joseph?
Well, I know for Vance, he's a guy that, as you said, he has a lot of respect around the NFL. He's a guy that earned his keep. He came up the hard way. I mean, he's a position coach, then got the job as a coordinator, went from a coordinator to a head coach, and players understand that it's a grind, and when you have to get it the hard way, they tend to respect you. And for Vance Joseph, a guy that, as a straight shooter, as people say, you always know where you stand with him. And I think anybody, whether it's a player, whether it's a coach, or whatever workforce that you're in, if you know where you stand with somebody all the time, you never have to wonder, and everybody can operate accordingly.
The other addition to Kingsbury's staff on the defensive end is Bill Davis as linebackers coach. And you talk about experience. Here's a gentleman that certainly has been in that role as defensive coordinator. He and Joseph have actually worked together when the two were in San Francisco. But I know you're very familiar with Davis when he was with the Cardinals from 2007 to 2010, both as a linebackers coach and then as the defensive coordinator.
Well, I think this is a great get for the Cardinals to bring Billy D back. And I'll just say, I have a lot of love and respect for Billy D, and I appreciate what he did for me in my career at the end, because my last 3 years, he was my coach, and I really enjoyed, his knowledge of the game. I enjoyed his approach because he was a guy that he let you be who you needed to be in order to be successful, and he was not a guy that was going to wear you out. He understood what players did what best, and I think just from a personality standpoint, he's that even keel guy. He's a guy that will let the veterans talk and express themselves, but he always maintains that respect as the guy that's in charge. And so I think this is a great get for the Arizona Cardinals. I know for Billy D, he's coming back, and the familiarity there alone will make it an easy transition for him. And I'm excited to see my old coach. I can't wait to hug his neck when I see him again.
What about specifically for the Cardinals, the players in that locker room? We don't know about the future of Deone Buchanan, but Hassan Reddick, Josh Bynes, on what Davis might be able to do for them.
Well, the one thing that I know that he'll be able to do is allow them to play fast. So the one thing that they can't do is have to think too much when you're on the field. Anytime that you have linebackers in a 3-4, you need those guys to just be able to run sideline to sideline and not have to worry about too much. Yes, they're going to have to make checks, and yes, they're going to have to adjust to what the offense gives them. But I do believe the more that you tell them, look, just go and be a heat-seeking missile and go get that guy and play with that certain leverage. And the one thing that we did when he was linebacker coach here is we played with great leverage, and guys were really stout against the run because of the way we fit in those particular gaps. And I think bringing that toughness back will be a great addition to this Cardinal coaching staff. And I know the linebackers in particular will definitely be enhanced because of the presence of one Billy Davis.
Former defensive coordinator with the Cardinals, the Eagles, and also the 49ers. Bill Davis, now the linebackers coach with the Arizona Cardinals. B-Tran, it's a little odd here not having you in studio with us, but appreciate you joining us on a Football Friday here on Cards Cover 2.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, guys. Guys, have a great one.
Always good
B-Train.
to catch up
Yes,
with B-Train here as we broadcast on this Football Friday from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, doing so in our Bose QC35s. And the other hire that we want to touch on, at least expend a little bit more time on, that is the decision to retain Jeff Rodgers as special teams coach. And special teams, you talk about it only when things go wrong, and we didn't talk much about special teams in 2018 because things went very, very right under Rodgers' direction. You talk about the kicking game, Zane Gonzalez, 7 of 9, including a couple of 50-yard field goals. Andy Lee, who led the NFL in punts as far as average, almost 49 yards every time he kicked the football. And then, of course, the ability to coverage kicks, both punts and kickoffs. So this is the one, yes, you needed a strong defensive coordinator, I get that, but I think this decision here for Rodgers to be staying in the mix is going to be not talked about enough, but I think one of those under the radar hires or retaining that is going to be very, very good and welcomed by the players in the locker room.
Well, the fact is, he knows the personnel. He knows the inner workings between the front office. So he did a good job. And you didn't mention Aaron Brewer.
I did not. No, see, you don't. And you know what? I'm sure he's completely happy with that. You don't want to be talking about the long snapper.
But between Farrell Cooper and Christian Kirk, we should see this return game trying to change field position. And I know we're waiting for Kirk to return one for a touchdown. He was close last year until he got injured. So, and then Farrell Cooper when it comes to kick returners. So they should get some good field position. And then you talked about the coverage units. Brandon Williams. We'll see if he's on the roster. But you have some other guys. Zeke Turner, and then you throw in a guy like Rudy Ford. They can cover down the field. So that's an area where we didn't talk about, and that was a good thing last year.
Exactly. Dennis Gardeck as well.
Yes.
Special teams huge in that regular season finale in Seattle. The Cardinals came up short in that contest. Again, let's hear from Kingsbury on the decision to keep Jeff Rodgers, as Kingsbury earlier speaking exclusively to azcardinals.com.
He's done a great job everywhere he's been. He's got a really calm demeanor. Players respect him. He's a well-respected coach in this league, very knowledgeable about all aspects of the NFL, and he'll be a huge help to me on a lot of fronts.
So 2 defensive hires, 1 on special teams, have yet to have an official announcement as far as what the Cardinals will do offensively outside of Kingsbury being your play caller, but there have been some names linked with the Cardinals and that side of the football. According to reports, former Giants head coach Ben McAdoo, former Falcons offensive coordinator Steve Sarkisian, who also was the former head coach at Washington and USC, potential, maybe offensive coordinator or some role offensively. And then you've got former Packers wide receivers coach David Rye and former Jets running backs coach Stump Mitchell. Rye, it's not a well-known name, but he did work with Kingsbury at Texas Tech back in 2013. And, of course, Mitchell held the same position with the Cardinals from 2013 to 2016, and his last season with the Cardinals happened to be the best season for David Johnson, and that would be huge if that move becomes official and the Cardinals are going to get back Mitchell on staff, because just of that relationship that you had a young Johnson and a veteran coach and a former running back that knows the game and thought very, very highly of David Johnson.
Yeah, my 3, things the way to protect Josh Rosen. Obviously, you got to protect him with the offensive line, and they got to get more weapons on the outside. But number 2 was David Johnson. He should be getting 1,500 to 1,800 yards, between 15 and 18, maybe 20 touchdowns. They have to find a way, and that will take pressure off of Josh Rosen.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll kind of follow this throughout the weekend and see how far this Cardinals staff continues to grow, especially offensively, because as Kingsbury said, he wanted it done yesterday, but it does take a little bit of time.
Now, we're getting exclusive video from azcardinals.com in his office. You can see how busy it is. He doesn't have anything on his shelves.
I did notice that. Yeah, you just move in and start turning on the television to start breaking down film.
Yeah, and he's doing a lot of interviews too.
Yeah, I'm sure he's like, just leave me alone.
He's got the pipes to do radio.
Maybe he could do some voiceover work. Jim Alejandro and Kingsbury might have to have a competition as far as who's got the best voice in the building.
Well, we knew who the best looking guy in the building is.
Yeah, Ohm's got that.
Ohm's got that. That's right.
He's got that all together here.
But he's off the market, though.
That's true.
Brandon. Brad is going to be he's coming up later here, folks. So we'll give him
Cardinals manager of social media.
We'll jab him when he gets in here.
Putting a staff together here for Kingsbury. It's something that he discussed earlier this week on the NFL Network's Good Morning Football show.
Having Steve Keim here is one of the better, GMs from what I've heard and seen in this league. He's really helped me, being able to lean on him for his network of coaches. And we want to bring the best coaches in that we can find. It's not about who I know or who I like. It's about getting the best guys in for this organization. And I'm excited about the names we've talked to and some of the guys that we're in the midst of interviewing right now.
I have to imagine that's a fast and furious process. Adam Gase was just hired last night. All these new coaches, Freddie Kitchens, they don't have staffs. Is it almost like you're recruiting again and you've got to put on that recruiting hat like you did in your college days?
There's no question. You're trying to sell positives, and a lot of these guys we're after, everybody's after, and they're really, really good coaches and will have a ton of opportunities. So how do you differentiate yourself, and how do you make your job most appealing?
You hear Kingsbury say he's leaning on general manager Steve Keim. He said the same thing during his introductory press conference, and that sounds like, one, he's okay with that.
Well,
And
he doesn't have the NFL experience.
No, but
he doesn't have the connection.
But some guys will come in and say, this is what I want because now I'm in charge as the head coach. This is my staff. I'm familiar and comfortable with these guys. Let's go. He's coming in and understanding that he doesn't have all the answers. And what do we talk about? Stay in your lane. Let me coach football. And then you give me the players, help me with the staff, because as he said now twice, you referring to Keim, you have the connections. You've been in this league for a number of years. You can tell me what we need because we know we need to fix that defense, and then the offense certainly needs to improve.
Yeah, and that was the plan all along, and I think we're starting to see a little bit of a trend when it comes to the NFL. We had our conversation with Bertrand Berry, and it's only been a few opportunities here. The thing is, though, you look at the staff, and I can't wait for the final staff to come out because you're going to see a lot of experience, and that's one thing you want to do. And I'm not here to knock the previous staff. It's time to move on. But, they had some guys that didn't have NFL experience. Everyone we're talking about, okay? All the names you've discussed, whether they're reports or whether they've announced signings when it comes to coordinators, it's all geared towards – taking some of the pressure off Kliff Kingsbury. He's told people, even in the presser, I don't have all the answers. I'm going to learn them. And Steve Keim, being a general manager, and former coaches are coming back here. To me, Steve has a nice Rolodex where he can reach out and talk to these guys because the main thing is you want to get in front of them. You want to show them the facilities. You want to take them to the stadium. You want to show them the locker room. You want to show them the cafeteria. You want to show them this state-of-the-art workout facility. Get him here, and then hopefully you don't want him to leave. But, like for Stump Mitchell, he had other interviews, so you can't hold him hostage. You can't put him in a closet and lock the door. You can, I guess, but you won't. So in that standpoint, I just like what they're doing. They're not going – and sometimes, we talk about quality control coaches. You got to start somewhere, and you can have enough of those guys. They're usually gophers. But for the most part, I just like the fact that they're going after experience. You mentioned Ben McAdoo, former head coach. I know he was the guy that – bench Eli Manning, but the Giants' offense was productive, okay? And then you mentioned Steve Sarkisian. He's worked with the Falcons the last couple of years, former head coach in college at USC and Washington. So he's got some personnel when it comes to players that he's scouting the last couple of years coming into the draft. So you start checking those boxes, and it's just they're not one particular thing. They have a multiple or a plethora of coaching experience, which is going to help this franchise.
Yeah, all geared towards helping out Kingsbury, who doesn't have the NFL experience. And last night on the Big Red Rage, Adrian Wilson talked about that, something that stood out to him in this whole interview process was that Kingsbury was very, in his words, Wilson's words, self-aware. He knows he needs help. He doesn't have all the answers, and A-Dub was heavily involved in the hiring process. We heard that from team president Michael Bidwell during the press conference on Wednesday. And A-Dub, as a former player, brought a different perspective, as he talked about with Paul Calvisi and Ron Wolfley.
I think just knowing scheme, knowing the personnel of our roster, and then just knowing where we want to go as a franchise. For me, that's the most important thing. It's not about one person. It's about the organization. And I think that's one thing that I want really the fans to understand is, to me, last year was an anomaly. And we have to get back to being a winning franchise and being a winning organization.
So, Dub, when you were in that room in the interview process here, and forgive me if I'm crossing lines here, but were you greasing it up on the board with Coach Kingsbury? Were you greasing it up in there?
Absolutely. You have to put guys on the spot. You have to really, really dig deep in terms of personnel, in terms of who we have and who we don't have. What is he going to need? It's different types of things that you really look for in terms of offensive mind, because really a lot of these guys, they do the same thing. Mm-hmm. But in terms of being ahead of the curve and really putting things out there that will get defenses kind of backing off of you, those are the types of things that you really want to see.
And Jay, you talked about you can't lock someone in a closet. Have you seen Adrian Wilson's office?
I have.
It's about the size of a closet.
He'll tell you he's a low-level scout.
It's, technically that's what his title is. He's just a scout, although, as a player, he was outstanding and a Ring of Honor member. And, he's scout in all caps.
Well, and we got to give Ernie a Corsi
because
right,
yes.
He has a relationship with Mr. B, and we know he's no longer involved in the day-to-day operations. So Michael Bidwell, but Michael really gave a lot of, gratitude because he wanted to help this franchise get turned around.
And you're looking sometimes for that outside voice, a different set of eyes.
And the fact that Adrian was in there, a former player who that's all he does is watch tape. I mean, between the college players and the upcoming free agents, he's great at all those guys. So, it's good they put him on the chalkboard. I mean, I remember when they brought a couple quarterbacks in here and they put him on the chalkboard, and some guys couldn't figure it out. And then you're talking about retaining information. That wasn't the case with Josh Rosen when he came in for a visit. So, Adrian is a guy that's close to Keim and obviously close to this franchise, including ownership and Michael Bidwell and Mr. B. And so, he's willing to do his part, but I was encouraged to hear he was in there on the chalkboard.
And not afraid to voice an opinion, even if it's different than what everyone else has in the room.
Yeah, and I don't know, we have the audio, but I don't know, we're not going to play it, but him and Wolf, they kind of differ on this air raid offense, and I know you got some details coming up on that, because, listen, I know that he's part of that Hal Mummy, Mike Leach, well, we're going to throw the ball 60 times. That's not going to happen here. You're not going to do that in the NFL. Otherwise, your quarterback's going to be, running for his life. He's going to be on his back a lot of the time. So I like the fact that, we're going to see balance in this offense, and I think you got some numbers to back that up.
Yeah, great transition there for me, MJ.
I do have a show sheet, so I am paying attention.
Football Friday here on Cards Cover 2 as we broadcast from Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, doing so in our Bose QC35s. And by the way, much more on the Adrian Wilson interview. You can go to azcardinals.com, download the podcast, the Big Red Rage, his appearance, former Big Red Rage host last night on Thursday.
Another guy that can do radio or podcast. He sounds like Barry White sometimes.
I can't have too many of these guys, and then we're out of a job. Jeez. All right, but to your point,
that was a good score that they got A-Dub, because I've been working on it for like 5 months.
I got a maybe out of them, but that was it.
Yeah, but you got to bet with them with Syracuse. And
Syracuse beats in North Carolina State. I need to do that with the general manager too.
Yeah, good luck with that.
I could really get some. Yeah, that's not happening.
But once again, stay in your lane.
Exactly. Yes, the words to live by here on Cards Cover 2, stay in your lane. But with regards to this offense and trying to predict what it might look like with Kingsbury as the play caller, even though he's the head coach, Pro Football Focus had some numbers this week looking back at Kingsbury's offenses at Texas Tech. And yes, they do throw the ball a lot. According to Pro Football Focus, 65% of all plays that Kingsbury called were pass plays, and 57% of the time they were on first down. So, and that's pretty much similar in what's happening around the NFL these days anyway, so that's not too far of a departure. And as far as the explosive plays, 15 yards or more, whether it's a run or a pass, Texas Tech since 2014 had 534 explosive plays. That is the most in the NCAA during that time. But two things stand out, and they're very rarely did Texas Tech, at least with Kingsbury as head coach, throw the ball 60-plus times. That was more of a Mike Leach system. But the running back, very prevalent at Texas Tech. Since 2014, 372 targets, 293 passes, and more than 2,500 receiving yards by running backs in the Texas Tech offense. And that's important because the Cardinals have someone here in David Johnson who we know can run the football, but is just as dangerous when you split him out as a wide receiver.
Oh, there's no doubt. And we're going to see that. The one word he uses, creativity. I mean, I know that David's the bell cow, but we've talked about getting Chase Edmonds on there and maybe getting a package for Logan, and they could add a running back in free agency. I mean, it's not an immediate need, but you like to have depth. I'm lining David Johnson on the outside, and if you're watching us right now on Cards Cover 2, you could see David has the ability, and we love that matchup when you get a linebacker or safety on that wheelhouse route. You throw it to the sideline shoulder, and only one guy can catch it. And I don't think those DBs want to tackle him because we need to see more of his stiff arm. So from that standpoint, I would think he's going to be targeted a good amount, whether it's 5 to 8, maybe 10 times a game, and hopefully get 7 or 8 receptions.
Yeah, make sure you take advantage of that mismatch. But let's go back and revisit what Kingsbury told us here on Cards Cover 2 when we asked him about the air raid offense and how it might fit in the NFL.
Yeah, I think you always try to get ideas, and then you start watching your guys, watching Patrick, watching Baker, watching Case, and you see the things they're doing that are playing to their strengths and things they did really well in college, and you're like, well, it's going that way, and that was exciting for me, and that's really why I'm here, to continue that trend and see if we can play offense at a high level, doing some different things with some different creativity.
You played in it, you've coached it, but that air raid now seeing a mix of it in the NFL. And I think there's a perception that you're going to come in and all of a sudden Cardinals are going to throw the ball 50 times. But just looking back at your 6 years at Texas Tech, you ran the ball successfully as well. A lot of questions about Josh Rosen, but curious of your thoughts on David Johnson with this offense.
Yeah, the air raid is a Mike Leach deal, and he still throws it 60 times a game and is successful, and I love him to death. But our deal is a little more balanced. We like to run the football. We like to have more play action, do some different things in the screen game. And David Johnson is a tremendous asset. He's a guy who can do from the backfield between the tackles. You can motion him out. He's a mismatch in space. And so I can't wait for our offensive coaches to get their hands on him and use him as many ways as possible.
You mentioned during the press conference meshing that college game with the NFL. Any examples that you might be able to give kind of off the top of your head that you might think could work, or what the philosophy on trying to put two things together?
Yeah, I think it's more, a lot of it's based on install and how you're going to present it and different things. The field is different with the hashes, so you got to see how that all aligns with what we do. And so to kind of present my stuff with the guy who's been in the league and used to it, I'm just excited to see what we can come up with and find a middle ground and still be aggressive, be creative every week, and come up with the best ideas we can come up with.
Protecting Josh Rosen, of course, is going to be key to all of this, and you would think, based on the numbers, that Texas Tech quarterbacks, they drop back so many times for a pass that they would be vulnerable to sacks. Well, again, not true. The perception is not reality. Again, Pro Football Focus earlier this week talking about Texas Tech quarterbacks under Kliff Kingsbury. Texas Tech only allowed a sack less than 4% of the time on dropbacks, which was the fourth lowest of any NCAA team. Quarterbacks do not get hit as much, do not get sacked as much. In fact, the most sacks allowed in a single season was 33. Josh Rosen was sacked 45 times last season. So, and Kyle Odegaard of azcardinals.com did a deep dive on this. I invite you to go to the website to check it out because, as he noted, you don't hear a lot about Texas Tech offensive linemen. You hear about Texas Tech quarterbacks. Well, those linemen are doing at least a good enough job to protect, or the scheme is good enough to allow those quarterbacks time to throw the football. So be interesting to see. Again, it all stems from protecting Josh Rosen to make sure he has time to throw, and this offense is able to move the ball up and down the field. But certainly there is that perception, but not reality when it comes to offenses under Kliff Kingsbury.
Well, that tells me two things. Probably we're going to see some of the hurry-up offense, and it doesn't mean you got to huddle. And we know the quarterback and play caller can talk into his headset. And the other thing is, it sounds like their quarterbacks are getting rid of the ball quickly.
Yes,
because you're in that up tempo. They can't substitute. You're looking for matchups. So two things stick out, protection-wise and getting rid of the football, and that's something that Josh is going to have to learn. With more protection, I think it's hand in hand.
Well, Texas Tech pass catchers also excelled in yards after the catch. Maybe a quick swing pass, screen pass,
slant,
and all of a
bubble
sudden,
screen, get the block down the field.
Yeah, and we saw that with Christian Kirk on that screen pass that he bolted for a 59-yard touchdown earlier this season. So there are ways that you can do this because you don't want Rosen to hold the ball. You'd much rather have the ball in the hands of Larry Fitzgerald, hopefully, David Johnson, Christian Kirk, Chase Edmonds, because those guys in space can make defenders miss, and sometimes all it takes is one guy, and then all of a sudden you've got a 10, 12, or you've broken one off for a big game, an explosive play.
Yeah, I mean, just on paper. Now we got to see it on the field based on personnel, but it should be night and day from a year ago. I mean, you're talking about putting points on the board now. Hopefully they can score and then stop them on defense, because now you can play a little bit of field position with your defense, and then you start running the ball with David Johnson. they want to stack 8 guys in the box, then I'm going over the top, and I'm going to try to extend some of those splash plays you mentioned.
Real quick before we preview the playoffs and hear from the Bird Gang, the Cardinals did make a roster move since we last joined you, and that was signing wide receiver Bryant Mitchell to a future contract. 6'2" pass catcher who spent the past 3 seasons in the CFL and caught a lot of passes. San Diego native, coming back to the West Coast, but again, looking for weapons, looking to deepen that position because right now, and again, if Fitz does decide to call it a career, that is a position that is in desperate need of help, and Mitchell now adds his name to the mix.
Yeah, to me, I would flood the position.
Absolutely.
I'm intrigued, obviously, with Larry coming back possibly, and then you throw Christian Kirk, and I think, Trent Sherfield and Tolliver, and then Farrell Cooper, and now you got Mitchell. Flood the position because they're going to continue. They'll likely bring 10 to 12 wide receivers to offseason workouts when you expand the rosters to 90. I anticipate we'll have 12, so I think they'll sign a veteran guy in free agency, and then hopefully they can draft a few. Just flood the position, let the best man win.
Last season, Mitchell in the CFL career highs with 60 receptions, almost 900 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. Look, the NFL has proven that they'll find you. It doesn't have just to be college. They'll go to the CFL. They'll go overseas. If you can play the game, they will find you. Now Mitchell, an Arizona Cardinal, once the new league year starts. All right, the season of 2018 continues this weekend with the conference semifinals, or what the NFL calls the divisional playoffs. I like semifinals better. That just sounds better to me. Conference semifinals, you okay with that?
No, I like divisional. Divisional
right.
weekend.
Divisional
Some
weekend.
people think it's the best weekend in football.
Well, the wild card weekend wasn't too bad.
No, but you're looking at the top 8 teams.
Yes.
You're talking about the 1 and 2 seeds that got a bye. You got teams that are playing well down the stretch, including the Chargers and the Colts. So it should make for an interesting weekend.
NFC, Saturday, Cowboys play the Rams. Sunday, it's the Eagles and Saints in New Orleans. Any chance the road team pulls an upset this weekend?
If I had I would say I could see the Cowboys beating the Rams. I like to pick the Falcons, but I think the Saints at home, they got a better advantage. Eagles.
The other flying team.
Yeah. But I like the Saints at home.
Even with Nick Foles, he's got a 4-game winning streak as far as starts in the playoffs.
No, and they're going to use that
Foles magic.
Yeah, and they're going to use that motivation when they got beat 48-7.
That's true. Earlier in this season.
Now they did have a few players that were out, and I'm sure they'll have a different game plan. All right, Craig, how about this? Since realignment in 2002, home teams have dominated the divisional round. 43 out of 64, that's 67%. Only 3 times, however, have teams been swept in all 4 games, and there have been 6-2-2 splits. So home teams have the advantage going to this weekend. It makes sense. They've been off for a week. Some of these teams, the 1 and 2 seeds in both the AFC and NFC. So when you look at it, I do think we're going to see a road team pull off an upset. And can you imagine if Sean McVay is 0-2 in the postseason? Then we're going to talk about their regular season ready. And then Jason Garrett would have more playoff wins than Sean McVay.
Say it ain't so. By the way, AFC matchup Saturday. The Chiefs host the Colts. The Patriots welcome the Chargers. The Chargers with Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers, by the way, has never beaten Tom Brady.
0-7.
Yeah.
Now you want to hear another stat?
Give me it.
All right. You look at the 8 remaining coaches. We talk about the offense is going with offensive-minded young coaches. And I hope this changes because that means the Cardinals are in the mix in the next couple of years. 7 of the 8 coaches are 50 years or older.
Okay, I'm looking at the different teams and McVay.
32.
Yeah. Very nice. I'll give you a couple ones. The Colts and Eagles as 6 seeds. The last 6 seeds to advance to the conference championship game, Packers and Jets both did it in 2010. So it should be a lot of fun coming up on Saturday and Sunday as the Cardinals manager of social media, Brandon Naidus, joining us here on Cards Cover 2. The man who wanted Kliff Kingsbury as head coach got Kingsbury as head coach. So I'm just going to have to pay more attention to what you say because you speak it into existence, as one famous American once said.
You know, it starts with the uniforms, and that was clearly identified months ago. And then, last week we're here, and we're talking about who we want as head coach, and lo and behold, it happens. So, I mean, I really appreciate, Ernie Accorsi and Adrian Wilson putting in their input as well. But obviously, when I come to town, it's totally different.
A little surprised that wasn't mentioned during the press conference.
Yeah, I
was
was
Adrian Wilson, Brandon Naidus.
It was a
left
little bit
out.
more of like a silent thing.
All right, before
but
we
it's
get
okay.
into Birdgang social questions, Brandon is so happy that the Cardinals have retained and brought back Billy Davis. Tell us why, Brandon.
We talked about it earlier. Nick
Well,
Bosa.
that's our conversation,
Oh,
but now we're going to let the masses know.
Okay, yeah. Well, he coached at Ohio State past couple of years. That's where Nick Bosa went. So who better to give you some insight on a potential candidate for a number 1 pick? A lot of draft analysts out there have him as the top prospect. Cardinals obviously have the first pick. Get a lot of insight on him.
I agree. A lot of good intel.
Absolutely.
Practice habits, how tough he is. Obviously, he had the hernia. Now they call it a core muscle injury. He had it done by Dr. Myers in Philadelphia, which is one of the renowned best in the country. So he should be able to come back from that injury. I don't think that's going to be an issue.
He's actually from the same area that I'm from. Nick Bosa, yeah, he went to St. Thomas Aquinas. It's actually, if you look it up,
a number of connections here.
It is the top high school every year in terms of
putting
NFL,
guys in the
NFL players. Yeah,
it's start calling you Kevin Bacon. Just the
6 degrees of separation.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
all right, let's hear what the Birdgang has to say on this Football Friday as we sound off.
So we'll start with Instagram. Talked a little bit about it. What are your predictions? Do you think Deion Buchanan will be back?
I certainly think there's a better opportunity for him to return this season because of the defensive switch. Now it's just a matter of he hits the open market. Is there another team out there? The Giants, the Buccaneers, teams that are familiar with what Buchanan can do defensively. But I now would love to see him come back.
Yeah, I think the door's open. And he's going to have to take a 1-year deal and bet on himself. And he'll get a lot of playing time. He could put up over 100 tackles like he's did the first 4 years in the league. So I think there's a real good chance that he can come back and play on a 1-year deal and prove himself. And if he plays well, you can try to extend him.
We'll switch over to the next question here, which is sticking on the defense, though. Vance Joseph hired. Do you think it was a good hire, and why do you think it was a good hire if you do?
Well, if you want to make that switch back to a 3-4, he's got experience. He's got head coaching experience. And now you've got someone that Kingsbury can lean on because it is a difference when you make that jump from college to the pros. But Kingsbury does have head coaching experience, but it's not at the NFL level. So I love the hire.
Yeah, I think they hit a home run. Obviously, all eyes were on Todd Bowles, and we knew that he wasn't going to get a head coaching gig and didn't see his name being interviewed at least. And so obviously he's going back to BA. But to me, 1A, 1B is Vance Joseph. Players respect him. He's been a coordinator. He's been a head coach. He's earned his stripes when it comes to coming in with experience. So I think it's a home run. Obviously, Todd Bowles was number 1, but I would say he's 1B.
And for those, don't get caught up on his one-loss record as head coach. Look at where he was as a defensive, or even with the Broncos. Look at his numbers with the Broncos, but where he was and the defenses and what they did with him as the coach.
And I'll follow it up with which players currently on this team are you looking for in his scheme? Like, who are you keeping your eyes on in this system?
Well, we know that Chandler Jones is certainly excited about this switch, but curious to see what maybe Hassan Reddick might be able to do now if he can stay in one position in one defense and get some stability, because we know he can certainly attack the football and he's got the speed as well.
I would say obviously the pass rushers, but I would put Budda Baker in there. I mean, he's a playmaker, and maybe he decides they're going to put him a little bit more in the secondary with DJ Swearinger. I think that would go a long way. So he's got some playmakers on defense: Patrick Peterson, Chandler Jones, Marcus Golden. Now the key is going to be Corey Peters playing the nose, and then how long is the rehab of Robert Nkemdiche, and then you throw in Olsen Pierre, who struggled in a 4-3. I would think he'd be one of your starting 3 defensive linemen and could rotate with Nkemdiche if he comes back at some point in the season, maybe week 8 or 9.
DJ Swearinger actually commented on the post about Vance Joseph, and he was really happy about it, to say the least. So we'll get to the final Instagram question, then we'll have one more from Twitter. So for Instagram here, biggest area that you think needs fixing on this team, and maybe even an area that you're looking for in the coaching staff for some of the openings?
Oh, offensive line. I'm we talk about protecting Josh Rosen. One, who's going to coach it, and then two, who are the players that will be coached?
I would say offensive line coach and the offensive line. And I anticipate the Cardinals need to go out and look at a left guard and a right tackle, depending on Joe Barksdale, and obviously the recovery time on Corey Cunningham. Offensive line coach is just as important as your coordinators because, the Cardinals really haven't had one. Maybe go back to Russ Grimm when he was here a long time ago. So I would say offensive line and then offensive line coach.
And then we'll switch over to Twitter now. Do you think David Johnson will have some more running lanes now with this specific offense? And getting back to what you talked about with the offensive line, do you think this scheme, which looks to get the ball out a lot quicker, do you think that helps as well?
As from a running back perspective, yeah, and I think more so as a wide receiver, even if he's running routes out of the backfield, because I think with a shorter passing game, he would be your number one check down, and perhaps maybe Christian Kirk coming across the middle. But I think this fits very well with the David Johnson.
Yeah, and maybe they're going to ask the lineman, to block 2 or 3 seconds, and then, obviously if you're running the ball, run blocking, hopefully some of these guys can get to the second layer, but they definitely have to tap into David Johnson. I mean, it's ridiculous the way he was used last year. Circumstances dictated that, whether it was play calling or protection or just lack of creativity. So I want to see him get up to 1,500 to 1,800 yards this year, all purpose.
That's all we got for you today, fellas. Appreciate your patience and excitement to see me today.
It's always our pleasure when you walk in here to the studio.
Is there anything else you guys want around here? Do you want maybe hot tubs on the do you want hot tubs on the 3rd floor or something? What do we want?
Well, it wouldn't do him any good on the 3rd floor.
Yeah, I mean, what do we want? Do we want a candy machine, a soda fountain?
No, we just want to win.
All right.
Yes, wins on Sunday. Can you do that for us?
Yeah, I'd like to win.
Okay.
Thank you, Brandon.
Appreciate that. Brandon Naidus, Cardinals manager of social media. We do it every show here on Cards Covered 2. Get involved using the hashtag Cards Covered 2, hashtag Cards Covered 2. Of course, if we don't answer your question here on the show, just keep them coming. Sometimes we'll do it via social media as well, Twitter and Instagram here. And that's going to wrap up this Football Friday edition of Cards Covered 2. Special thanks to those behind the scenes, Tim Delaney, Jim Omahundro, Jeremy Schnell, and, of course, Brandon Naidus as well. For my partner, Mike Jurecki, I'm Craig Grialou. We'll talk to you next week here on Cards Covered 2.